So now, in the interest of time, I think we will start the webinar, and I will pass over to Michela Morese, who's the Executive Secretary of GBEP, to give a brief introduction to the Global Bioenergy Partnership and our work. Over to you, Michela.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Connie, and good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar to all our colleagues and friends connected. As you know, this webinar is organized by the Global Bioenergy Partnership as part of our program of work, and it also represents an important activity of a GIZ-funded project, which is also a contribution to the Global Bioenergy Partnership program of work. For those of you who are not familiar with GBEP, it is an international initiative established in 2006, mainly focusing on sustainable bioenergy for sustainable development, climate targets, and food and energy security. As you may see from the slide on the screen, this is the membership of the partnership. It's around 80 partners and observers, mainly governments and international organizations. FAO is one of the founding partners. Since 2006 has strongly contributed to its program of work and also hosts its secretariat, which is our team, coordinating and organizing the activities of the partnership, including this specific webinar. Next slide, please, Connie. Thank you. So bioenergy, since the very beginning, has always been seen as a key thematic area within the partnership, because we are keenly aware that bioenergy presents excellent opportunities, but not without challenges. And then sustainability is key to take out the best of the opportunities. In light of these considerations, the partnership has developed something which is considered to be the most widely recognized and agreed set of indicators for the assessment and monitoring of bioenergy sustainability. Next slide, please. And this table represents a summary of just the titles of the set of 24 sustainability indicators that the partnership has developed, agreed, and implemented in many countries. As you may see, there are 24 indicators, 8 under each pillar of sustainable development: environmental, social, and economic. And in particular, these indicators could be applied to any type of bioenergy, gaseous, liquid, solid, and also the fact that 8 indicators under each of the 3 pillars, so equally distributed, is because the idea is also to give an important message in the sense that sustainability could only be achieved if equal importance to the 3 pillars is given. Well, this webinar today seems very timely and important if you consider the role that bioenergy and specifically its links with FLR, with forest landscape restoration, could play in light of the IPCC report on climate change and land, which was published in August last year. Now I would like to give the floor to Constance Miller, to Connie, that will give you an overview of the GBEP work in the context of which this webinar has been organized, and will also introduce the keynote speakers of today. Over to you, Connie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michela. I've now turned up my microphone, so I hope that the audio will be slightly better. So this webinar, as Michela mentioned, is part of the scope of work of the Global Bioenergy Partnership of GBEP, specifically under the working group on capacity building and the activity group 4 on wood energy towards sustainable modern wood energy development. So I just wanted to give a brief overview of the evolution of this activity group. It began in 2013, focused on small-scale wood energy development in developing countries. And in 2015, a stock-taking paper was published on successful cases. And this is available online. In late 2017, the theme was expanded to include woody biomass for forest landscape restoration and sustainable livelihoods. Now, the aim of this thematic area is to understand and disseminate information on the opportunities for sustainable wood energy production and use to contribute positively to forest landscape restoration. As such, in 2019, we launched a call to collect examples of the positive relationships between sustainable wood energy and forest landscape restoration. This collection is due to be published later in 2020, and there's still time to be part of this publication if you would like. If you have interesting cases that you think should be included in our collection, the deadline for the call is the 31st of May 2020, and all the information is available on our website and will also be circulated to all of the registered participants. So finally, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. Dr. Tiziana Pirelli holds a PhD in Agricultural Sciences and Technology from the University of Udine and is a specialist in climate smart agriculture and integrated food and energy systems. She's been working with GBEP for FAO since 2016. Let me just Professor Evelyne Thiffault is a professor at the University of Laval in the Department of Wood and Forest Sciences, and she works on the development of sustainable forest biomass supply chains and the role of forest bioenergy in the fight against climate change. And finally, Veronica Agodoa Kitti from Asha Initiative in Ghana is responsible for facilitation and implementation of biochar research outcomes at grassroots level and is a member of the steering committee of the Africa Biochar Partnership. And finally, Olivier Dubois, who is a Senior Natural Resources Officer and Coordinator of FAO's work on energy at FAO, and also the leader of the GBEP Activity Group 4, will be moderating our question and answer session. So before I give the floor to Tiziana for our first presentation, I would like to play a short video developed by the GBEP Secretariat that introduces the topic of the interlinkages between sustainable wood energy and FLR. who will be our first presenter.
Hi Connie, I hope you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
No, we could before, but not anymore.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry for this inconvenience. Okay, now it should work. So, sorry for the... Okay, thank you, Connie. Thank you for having shared the video, and I will give a brief introduction on the positive relationship between sustainable wood energy and forest landscape restoration. And let me start from by saying that the role of wood energy in the role of wood energy is key, as we all know, and in the FLR context. And let me say that currently there are three initiatives at regional level that aims to restore deforested land and forest degraded land, especially the initiative 20 by 20 in Latin America and Caribbean, and AFR 100 initiative, which was launched in 2015 in Africa. And the most recently launched initiative that is interests Europe, Caucasus, and Central Asia, that aims to restore 30 million hectares by 2030. While our focus on wood energy, first of all, because it is well known that traditional wood energy is not sustainable, and as Michela was mentioning before, the IPCC special report on climate change and land published in 2019 has recognized the key role of traditional wood energy as one of the drivers of deforestation and forest landscape restoration, especially in developing countries. This is for various reasons that I tried to summarize this in these pictures, because it's inefficiently produced and it produces a huge amount of greenhouse gas emissions. But at the same time, we have recognized, for instance, in the Global Landscape Forum, that the traditional wood energy guarantees access to energy to about 2.4 billion people all over the world, and especially in developing countries and in remote areas, and offers also one of the most important sources of income, and offers access to energy at a very cheap, a very low price. So how to turn modern traditional wood energy in a more sustainable and more efficient form of energy. So modern wood energy forms are already available, and we will just want to share the knowledge on how modern wood energy could act and contribute to forest landscape restoration. But first of all, I would like to highlight the fact that modern bioenergy is not a one-size-fits-all solution, and the fact that a deep knowledge of the local context is required to build a sustainable bioenergy sector. First of all, because it's important to know the biomass that is available at local level, because the best will be to realize the short bioenergy value chain by adding value to the biomass that is locally available. So it's essential to know the type, the amount of biomass, and also the competitive uses of this biomass. And this is important to choose the most adapted, the most suitable, let's say, bioenergy pathway. But then how to choose the scale? To choose the scale, we need to know the energy requirements of the local population, the type of energy requirements, if we need energy for cooking, for heating, and so on. But the knowledge of the local context is important also because it allows to transform weaknesses into opportunities, such as in the case of the presence of milk lands, for instance, marginal, underutilized and contaminated lands, or such as in the case of large amounts of organic waste and residues available at the local level. So I want to highlight the fact that pre-feasibility studies are key, and long-term monitoring of the bioenergy system realized are key as well. But let's go into the details and on how to improve the efficiency, the sustainability of the wood energy value chain. This could be done by bioenergy, modern bioenergy, both through a direct and an indirect approach. The direct approach includes action that acts directly on the wood energy value chain and on each step of the wood energy value chain, starting from the production of biomass up to the optimization of the use of bioenergy products. In particular, the production of biomass could be maximized and optimized and making it sustainable by adopting sustainable forest management practices and by planning new forests, for instance, dedicated forest plantation, or the use of agroforestry techniques and the sustainable management of urban trees and forestry. These actions will allow for the conservation of native forest species and of related ecosystems and biodiversity. How to improve other action to improve the sustainability are to make the best use of waste and residues produced from the wood industries, such as sawdust, for instance, by producing pellet, briquettes, and chips that are called improved feedstock because wood pellets have the same energy content of an hardwood species. And a well-known improved feedstock is charcoal, but unfortunately so far it is produced in an inefficient way. So we need to improve the kilns used for charcoal production. And we also need to introduce new improved technologies for using these improved feedstock or fueled wood. And this could be improved cook stove, for instance, but also pyrolysis and gasification plant at various scale, from the household scale to productive level. And as I was saying, it's important to add value and to optimize the use of bioenergy products, but we will see later how to do this. Indirect action could be also implemented to improve the sustainability of the wood energy value chain and to reduce the pressure on forest resources. And this includes alternatives to wood energy. Alternative biomass, but also alternative technologies and alternative bioenergy pathways. Regarding the alternative biomass, we can also consider the types of waste and residues that are available at the local level from the agricultural and agro-industrial value chain. For instance, various types of shells that could be used as such, or straw and husk that could be transformed, pre-treated again in improved feedstock and used to produce pellets and briquettes, such as in the case of bamboo, for instance, that is used to produce charcoal briquettes that you can see here. But also livestock and fisheries residues, such as animal bone, could be used for producing energy, and at the same time they produce a very good quality biochar. But to use these type of residues, we should introduce other technologies such as pyrolysis and gasification plant and clean cook stove. We can also consider alternative bioenergy pathways, as I was saying. For instance, that biogas and biomethane that could add value, that could, let's say, bring out the energy that is still in wet and liquid waste and residues. Such as agricultural and agri-food industry residues such as cassava wastewater, but also animal manure and sewage sludge, as well as human residues. These also the organic fraction, for instance, of municipal solid waste could be used for producing biogas through the anaerobic digester, and biogas could be used for cooking, power, and heating production. The byproduct of biogas is the digestate. And how to optimize the use of this byproduct, namely biochar and digestate. The biochar could be used as a source of additional energy, so it's a fuel because it's the same, let's say, of charcoal. And both of them, biochar and digestate, could be used as soil amendment and fertilizers, but they could also be used as growing medium component for forest seedlings and used in the nurseries, for instance, as soilless substrates. And biochar has been proved to be very positive, to have very positive effects on seed germination and seedling growth. But both of these byproducts could be used to increase the soil organic carbon content, allow for nutrients recycling, and as a means for carbon capture and storage. So today we will hear two examples of positive linkages between wood energy and forest landscape restoration. One will concern a direct approach and the other one will concern an indirect approach. But let me give the floor to Olivier Dubois so that he can introduce better these two speakers. Thank you.
Yes, hello everybody. Do you hear me? Well, hello?
Yes, please go ahead, Olivier.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So, yes, so my name is Olivier Dubois, and in French, my name means olive tree of the wood. So no wonder people ask me to facilitate a workshop on wood energy and so anyway, yes, I'm very excited to moderate and very pleased to moderate this discussion and the presentation, but I'm also very excited to have two very interesting presentations and presenters and two very different presentations. So the first one, as was introduced by Tiziana, is basically about the links between bioenergy and forest management, and looking more at the business case. And the second one is, as Tiziana introduced, is more indirect, is that you start from outside the forest, but then you bring the whole thing to the forest land restoration topic. So without further ado, I'll give now the floor to Professor Evelyne Thiffault. Evelyne, you have the floor.
Hi. I will open the presentation. Hi, do you see my slides? I assume.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very glad to be talking to you today. So I will talk about a case study in Quebec, in Canada. So Quebec is in the eastern part of Canada, and we are really in the middle of the boreal biome. So what I will show apply mostly to boreal forests, but at the same time I want to give an example on how forest bioenergy can help on the way toward implementing forest ecosystem-based management. In Quebec, the forest area is mostly under public tenure, so it's about 90% of forest is under public tenure. So it's the government that set the rules. So most of the forest is managed for timber and a bit for pulp also. Right now, forest bioenergy is very, very small. So it's just a nascent business. So it's mostly for forests are managed for timber. Since the 1990s, there was a big public commission about forest management across Quebec, and that commission came to the conclusion that there was a big social demand across Quebec to move away from regular industrial forest practices that are based mostly on plantation, and to move towards a more natural way to manage boreal forest across Quebec. So we started to implement what is called the ecosystem-based forest management, and naturalness needs to be at the heart of management decisions. So it's a way to ensure and restore biodiversity across landscapes as a way to support integrity of ecosystems. So naturalness, it's the degree to which forest ecosystems are mostly run by natural processes. So we had the challenge as foresters to find ways to both ensure a high degree of naturalness in our forests, but at the same time maintaining a productive forest management. So to both have a good wood production, because it's an important part of the economy, but at the same time working with keeping a lot of naturalness and diversity across the landscape. And also recently, wood products, solid wood products are now recognized in the Quebec policies as an important way of fighting climate change. So we need to keep a flow of wood products, but at the same time maintaining a high level of naturalness. So it was a big challenge for foresters, but we have come with regulations and rules for that. So for example, when we do clear-cut operations in the boreal forest, advanced regeneration, so small seedlings that are already on site, they need to be protected and not destroyed by operations. And then we allow natural seedlings to establish on the site during the following years. So we try to avoid, whenever possible, using plantation. So it's really protecting and favoring natural regeneration. When we have to do plantation in places where natural regeneration is not enough, there is no chemical control of competition. And even in the way we don't talk about vegetative competition now in plantation. We now use the expression accompanying species, just to see that we try to promote biodiversity even in plantation. So species that are not wood crops, they are still considered valuable inputs into the ecosystem. So that around the landscape, that causes quite diverse stands. So we have a mix of species in stands, and even in plantations, you will have hardwoods and a mix of species. So that makes diverse stands and landscapes. So we are moving towards more and more naturalness in across the landscapes. We also have natural disturbances across boreal landscapes, but it is understood that those disturbances are part of natural cycle of forest. So we try to work with natural disturbances and not systematically fight them. So whenever possible, we let them run their course and try to work with the way the influence landscape. So that's all good in the case of biodiversity and maintaining a high diversity in landscapes. But at the same time, this has caused problems for the industrial wood processing network because they need to adapt to very variable wood qualities. So when you have high diversity in landscapes, then it makes it harder for wood processing, because they usually have quite strict standards and requirements in terms of wood quality. But the push towards having more diverse stands and landscapes make it harder to fit it with their standards. At the same time, you have pulp mills that had a bit less strict standards, but pulp mills are closing, have been closing over the last years because of the downturn of the paper demand. So it makes it harder to find an optimum spot between promoting naturalness and diversity in landscapes and still having a productive wood industry. So because of that, the level of actual harvest is quite low for some species across Quebec. So those are just data, but I want to show you photos of what's happening more and more across the landscape. So this is an example of a clear-cut area, and this is very frequent across Quebec. So the forest industry goes there and they just take the trees that have sufficient quality for the requirements of the sawmills, and they need to leave on the ground the trees that do not meet the requirements. So they are left as residues on the ground like that. So there's a lot of variability across regions depending on the design of the industrial network in each region. But those are very frequent sites that you see across Quebec. So lots of wood left on the ground like that. And the more we try to implement high diversity and naturalness and restore that, the harder it makes it for the wood industry because of the wood that do not meet the strict requirements of sawmills. So it's not just photos that I speak; those are quite familiar seen across Quebec. So this is why we see that we need to find a way to increase the diversity within the industrial wood processing network to fit with the diversity that we wish for and that the public demands in the forest. So this is where bioenergy can play an important role, because the requirements for producing bioenergy from wood, it's much less in terms of wood quality. So you can turn even degraded wood into bioenergy. So they can help add diversity in the forest industrial network and give a value to those unloved trees that are just left on the ground right now. So we have made a few experiments across Quebec to see how it would be possible to add bioenergy to the wood that is being harvested in stands. And what we found is that you would need to have extremely careful tree sorting and processing to make sure that it's only the degraded wood that would go to bioenergy or biofuels, and that the sound wood would be reserved for lumber, just to make sure that there is no sound wood that would go to towards bioenergy. So we found that you need extra training of machine operators and foresters so that they become better at sorting wood quality when they are on the field while doing operations. So on the photo on the left, you have wood that can go to sawmills, and then on the right, it's wood that go to bioenergy. One other thing that we are exploring is how when you when you don't have takers for bioenergy, you have a lot of debris left on the ground, and this goes against the establishment of natural regeneration. So what often happens that we see more and more is that the more residues that are left on the ground, this increases the need for plantation because the natural residues do not get established. The photo on the left, this is what you see, and on the photo on the right, what you see is an area where we have experimented with procuring the low quality wood for bioenergy, and in that case, it makes it easier for having proper suitable microsites for natural regeneration to naturally implement and to better protect the natural seedlings. So I don't want to focus too much on number, but we have measured the amount of suitable microsites and the amount of debris that is left when you have biomass procurement or not. And when you of course, when you take degraded woods or unloved woods for bioenergy, then you create more suitable microsites and you protect more natural regeneration, which helps meet our need for high naturalness in our forests and the way we want to promote a natural regeneration. You can also see on the photo on the right that even when you do biomass procurement, you still leave lots of residues on the ground. All the foliage is still left on the ground and most branches, so that helps protect soil productivity. So to summarize, the push towards ecosystem-based forest management in Quebec, so it's not only in Quebec, this is spreading in other provinces and across the world also, this push towards ecosystem-based management. It means that you push for a high level of naturalness and diversity, but it also means a high variability in the quality of wood supply. And what we are experimenting is that this causes an abundance of unloved trees that do not meet the standards of conventional forest industries. And the reference scenario in that case is that those trees are still cut when the companies go to take the high quality trees, and those trees are just left on the ground and can cause problems for establishing regeneration. And it's also a loss of opportunities when you have so much trees just left on the ground. So if we use those trees as sustainable feedstock for bioenergy, it helps meet our wish for ecosystem-based forest management, and it can help unlock stands that have a proportion of sound trees for sound wood, because you offer a market for the low quality trees, and it can help improve the establishment and growth of the new stands. But in both cases, this needs more training of forest workers and managers so that they can deal with those aspects. And at the same time, bioenergy needs to be considered an integral part of a forestry system. It needs to be considered a product alongside the other wood products. So diversity in managed forest landscapes requires diversity in the forest industrial networks, including takers of unloved woods. And this is where bioenergy can help promote, can help forest ecosystem-based management. But that requires improved training of forest workforce. So on the photo, this is me teaching future forest managers. And it also needs that the forest bioenergy products are considered members of the forestry team, so that forest is managed for bioenergy alongside the other wood products. Thank you.
Thank you. It seems like your last slide is like a war. So we have warriorism. Bioenergy in forest management. Now, I hope sometimes it's not a real war. No, anyway, very fascinating stuff from an angle which is often not considered. But let's turn. Please, I invite people to share their questions through the chat box, and then there will be possibilities also to ask questions directly. But we will move now immediately to the second speaker, who is Veronica, Agodoa Kitti, and she will actually present something that an indirect approach that was introduced by Tiziana, which is about, from outside the forest to the forest through biochar. So, Veronica, you have the floor. Veronica, we have your last slide, so I think we should...
Hi. Yeah, I think they are loading my presentation. Hi, everybody. Hi. Hi, everybody.
Yes, go ahead, Veronica, we hear you. We also hear some background sound, but go ahead.
Hi. Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Veronica. Yeah. My name is Veronica Agodoa Kitti. My presentation is on biochar technology, positive linkage between sustainable wood energy and forest landscape restoration. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The content includes biochar systems, production of improved feedstock from agriculture, agricultural waste and residues, production and sale of microgasifier stove, the role of biochar systems and its potential to improve soil quality and increase crop yield, and biochar use as a restoration of degraded and polluted soil. Next slide, please. We have been working since 2009 in developing biochar systems, including pellet production from agricultural residues and a stove kiln for efficient production of cooking energy, and biochar as a byproduct for soil amendment. Within the biochar system, we were engaged in converting of agro waste, for instance, corn cob, and process them into pellets. And this pellet is being used in the microgasifier. 70% of it is converted into syngas for cooking energy, and the remaining 30% becomes a char, which is a biochar for soil amendment. Next slide, please. Producing improved feedstock from the agricultural waste and residues, we convert corn cob and process them into pellets through a pelletizer. Next slide, please. The relationship that exists between the biomass, which is the corn cob, and the pellet is very close. For instance, if you put in 2 kilograms of corn cob into the machine, the first output for the first time will give you 80%. Then the subsequent feed to the machine will give you 98% of the biomass as pellet. Next slide, please. The microgasifier is also produced by using simple tools, and for this reason the technology is very easy to replicate. Next slide. The microgasifier stove using woody and agricultural solid residue, for instance, palm kernel shells or pellets. These are locally produced from forestry and agricultural residues, thus avoiding the use of fuel wood and safe forest. It is comparatively lower cost of energy for cooking and heating water. Lower energy as compared to the charcoal, wood fuel, and LPG gas. For instance, a stove uses 1.5 kilograms of fuel for cooking between 1 to 2 hours, and this depends on the external air conditions, and it will be used to cook for a family of 3 to 12 people. It also cooks faster than other alternative cook stoves, that it saves time for other household and economic activities by the stove users. Next. We also engage in the sale of the Biochar stove for women, and also they use it for cooking as a cooking energy. And this is a means of our contribution to forest landscape restoration. Majority of the users are poor households and who mostly live within the rural communities or the farming communities that we work in. Next slide. The biochar, which is the byproduct, can be used to amend soil, and it acts as a soil amendment to improve land fertility and increase yields. Due to its high content in carbon, biochar also serves as a means of carbon capture and storage. Biochar increases the soil capacity to hold nutrients and water over a long period of time and makes them available to the plants, thus allowing for increased yield. Biochar is porous material. As such, the holes in the biochar enable air circulation in the soil to improve soil fertility. It also provides platform for microorganisms to grow in the soil. Next. Biochar facilitates faster and healthy germination of and growth of forest seedlings. Next slide. Biochar also works as a soil amendment to restore degraded and polluted soil. For this reason, biochar is bringing back toxic and degraded land to life. Biochar prevents the plants from absorbing the toxic element, including the heavy metals that are contaminated in the soil through the mining activities. Next slide, please. When biochar is buried in the toxic and degraded forest soil, it has been proved as a successful means to support seed germination, plant and forest growth. That is, it's bringing forest landscape back to life. Next slide. In conclusion, biochar technology enables efficient energy access with less dependence on wood for energy and have value addition to improve soil fertility, crop yields, and forest regeneration. Next slide, please. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Veronica. Again, very fascinating presentation on kind of circularity applied in the field, directly combining agriculture and forestry. I'm going through the chat box, and I actually see that many questions have to do with kind of trade-offs. And one of the questions that was asked was, you know, the wood industry people, to what extent in Canada, in Quebec, or to what extent are they interested in naturalness, and because there are trade-offs obviously in that. But I mean, we saw a way to get out of this trade-off by using the debris from forest management or bioenergy. But then there's another trade-off: is to what extent removing all these debris, what's the impact on the environmental functions, you know, soil organic matter and other aspects that actually might be affected by removing all these debris. I think that's one question for the colleague from Quebec, for Evelyne. These trade-offs, how do you address them? How are you studying these trade-offs?
One thing about Quebec and also most of Canada is that forests are under public tenure. So that helps a lot in the case that it's the government calls the shot and impose regulations in response to social demand. And then the government, for example, in Quebec, they give license to companies. They give rights to companies to different amounts of wood based on the requirements of the wood processing facilities. So it's the government that distribute the wood. But what we have seen in the past years is that there is a lot of wood that is not being allocated to companies because no companies want the ungloved ones. So that's one thing. I think it's the special case of the fact that it's a public tenure. What forest industries think about this naturalness? It's of course, it's been a bit of a push from the industries, because they complain that it increases their costs and it makes their life more difficult. But we have been in that process since the 1990s. So forest industries have adapted more and more to that concept, because it's a strong social demand. And in one way, it helps them with their forest certification and the social acceptability of their operations. It's not an easy process. I don't want people to think that it's an easy process. There's a lot of fights, of course, across the province, and a lot of complaints, and the public is complaining that the government is not doing enough. But we're still in that growing pains of finding the sweet spot so that everybody can be happy. But it's really in response to the social demand of having natural landscapes that the government is implementing this strategy. So it's a challenge to both forest managers, that they need to apply this strategy on the ground, and the companies that need to adapt to that. So that's one part of the question. And then the other part about protecting soils, we have experimental designs across Canada, testing different level of biomass harvesting to see the impacts on soils. In most cases, just because the stands are very variable, it's quite difficult to harvest a lot of biomass. So you've seen the photos where you had biomass procurement. You still have a lot of material left in most cases. And what we have measured in the field, so we have about 25 or 30 years of measurements of the effect of biomass procurement, and we see very little negative impact on soil productivity, except in the case of already poor sites, marginal sites that are already quite poor. On those, you need to avoid any intensive management measures, of course. But we have these trials, and we work with scientists across the world to find good measures to protect soil. But in most cases, we see no negative impact of biomass procurement, because there's a lot of material that is left on the site anyway, and produced through the natural rotation of the stand, again linked to the high variability of the forest landscape.
There's some questions also for Veronica, and one is a very simple one. Is basically, how do we apply the biochar? And then I have one which is actually again linked to the trade-off, because using residues can be lead to trade-off between the different possible uses of residues, and especially for small-scale farmers and rural areas in Africa, people have some animals around their houses and their gardens, and some of these crop residues are used to feed the animals. So one question is basically from the participant about how do you apply it, and my own question is basically how do you address this possible competitive use of agricultural residues between soil management, bioenergy, and also animal feed. Just a reminder, if you want to ask questions directly, you can raise your hand, and then right after Veronica answers, we'll open questions to the floor. Thank you.
How we apply Biochar? We apply Biochar with simple farming tools. So either we apply it around tree crops, and mostly within the topsoil. If it's an open land, we broadcast them on the land and use simple farming tools to mix with the topsoil. Microorganisms are in the topsoil, so Biochar is applied within the topsoil to work very well. If it's on the large scale, Biochar can be applied with a vehicle, but since we are on a small scale, we use simple farming tools to apply the Biochar in the farmland.
Yes, and the issue of competing use of these agricultural residues, have you addressed that? Between animal feed, soil management, and bioenergy.
Is that a question to me?
Yes.
Is the question again?
No, because these residues from agriculture, you can use them to feed animals, but also to directly apply to the soil. You leave them to the soil. So there is a competition between the use of these residues, between bioenergy, animal feed, and soil management. So have you come across this kind of trade-off?
Yeah, what we actually use is waste. What is not used to feed animal or for any other alternative. So we're talking of agricultural waste, which has no alternative uses. For instance, the corn cob is normally disposed of either in the farm to clear the land for new farming through open fire, or when they are brought into the communities for processing, they are dumped outside the communities and disposed of in an open fire. So these corn cobs do not have any alternative for feeding animal or any other purpose. These are the very agricultural residues or waste that are being used. We actually analyze what actually is waste, what is not put into alternative use. So that is the principle behind
very wise
what we
attitude,
use
I think.
in the
Then
store.
a question to both of you, to Evelyne and to Veronica, is what are the barriers for the spreading of these technologies? I mean, what are the main hurdles is it capacities? Is it a social thing? Is it funding? First, let's say, Evelyne, what's your take on this? The main hurdles for the spreading of the technology, about the approach you presented, and then the same question to Veronica.
I think in the case of what I presented is really to see that there are different ways to do forest management. Like plantation forestry is not the beginning and the end of forestry, and forest management is not incompatible with high level of biodiversity and naturalness. So I was training as a forester when that switch was begun to be made in Quebec and Canada. So it's learning a new language and to see diversity as a good thing. And this goes a bit against the fiber of what we mostly think about forestry. So it's the way you train foresters is one key thing to see that diversity in stands can be compatible with active forest management. And then that at the same time you will need to be quite flexible in the kind of products that you can procure. So you need diversity both in the stands and in the industrial network. And that means accepting that logs from whole trees can go to bioenergy, because this can help guaranteeing diversity in the forest.
Okay, thank you. Veronica, in your case, what are the main barriers for adopting these technologies?
The main barrier for adopting the technology is the stock price. The price of the stock is quite high depending on the exchange rates in the country, because most of the materials are imported into the country. So when the dollar goes up, the price of the material goes up. So that is the main challenge for the adoption of the technology. The second one is funding. After our project, it's very difficult to get adequate funding to support the replication of this particular system. So these are the two main challenges that we have so far. We have, I could see somebody also asking a question about how many people are involved in the production of the stove now. We have 3 clusters of people producing the stove now. When I say cluster of people, we have a group of people, artisans, who are in group, and they are in 3 groups. We have 2 groups in Cape Coast and 1 group in Takoradi. In all, it will be about 25 people who are engaged, whom we have trained and are engaged in the production of the stove.
Any question that you want to ask directly? We have a few minutes. I don't.
My question is, how can we be supported, or how can a support be provided for adoption of this system in Africa, to maximize the adoption in Ghana and to the rest of Africa? Is there any particular support, looking at all the benefits that are involved in the Biochar system, for energy access, for improving the environment, for landscape restoration, for provision of cultivation of food, etc.?
Well, that's a $1 million question that maybe we don't have the time to address. If you want my own take, is maybe the biochar itself is not, the benefits are not well known enough. The other one can be how much biochar you need to apply to your soil to have some benefit. Apparently, I mean, I had also my own experiences in Gabon. You don't need a lot, but other people would argue that you need a lot. If it's the case, then you need the whole logistics to transport the biochar, the cost of the biochar. So there might be aspects there which maybe you have you haven't found that as a barrier. But I think the whole issue of why is such an interesting technology or product like biochar not more spread? And I take advantage of this to inform participants that GBEP is also undertaking some webinars related to biochar, and maybe Connie or Michela can say a word at the end on this. All right, I think we're coming. Any other question? Any observation from the
Olivier, if I may, I get your point. I think that is a very interesting point. I would like to ask Veronica how much biochar she is applying and how she is applying the biochar, in the sense, should you have to apply the biochar in one solution, or do you go ahead by applying by continuing applying the biochar that you produce to your garden or to your field?
Yeah, the biochar is being applied by farmers, but once a particular landscape is you apply the biochar on a particular landscape, you don't have to repeat the application again. It's once at a time. And we collect all the biochar from various users and distribute them to the farmers. For instance, when we have cocoa farmers, we have section of cocoa farmers to see how the biochar works. Maize farmers, section of maize farmers to see how it works, granules and tiger nut farmers. So this is the way that the biochar is applied, and also to try and see how it works on a degraded soil. So these are the strategies that we use to apply the biochar.
Shift hat from facilitator to resource person, I think making a business case, making a very simple calculation on costs and benefits would enhance the case for biochar. And I think this kind of information is really badly missing from the biochar experiment from different parts of the world. And I think this would really help. I mean, that's, I guess in the case of Quebec, this is exactly what's being done, is what's the business case of using these debris for bioenergy. But not only the financial, also other aspects, obviously social and environmental. With that, if I don't see any other questions from the chat box, and hands being raised. I would like to conclude quickly my own thoughts on this is, okay, we touched on a topic which is complex and often controversial, which is the use of woody biomass to produce bioenergy. And it's a very good and salutary thing to have some positive experiments being presented. My own take is that sustainability of bioenergy in general, in particular in this case, is really context specific. And the second take that I get from these presentations is, of course, one size doesn't fit all, like Tiziana was mentioning, and we saw that. But really, we need to look carefully at the trade-offs and synergies between different aspects. You know, even the residues can have trade-offs, can have problems using residues, like competing use of residues for soil management, for animal health, for animal feed. But the two examples that we saw, they have addressed that. So with that, this is my own gut feeling about these two presentations, takeaway messages. With that, I would like to pass the floor now to Michela Morese, maybe for concluding remarks from her side. Michela?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Olivier. Thank you for your moderating role. Indeed, we have a lot of elements for further thinking within GBEP and outside for those participants who are not contributing regularly to GBEP, but we have a lot of good elements from the today webinar. Indeed, I would like to thank also the speakers, Tiziana, Evelyne, and Veronica for their very interesting presentation. I would like to thank Connie for coordinating the organization of this webinar, and also Carlos within our team that together with Tiziana, with support from Connie and me, did great work also in development of the short video that we've seen at the beginning of the webinar. Just a reminder that, as Connie was mentioning at the beginning, we are still collecting examples of positive relationship between sustainable wood energy and FLR. And if you think you have a good experience to share with us, please do so. The deadline for submission of templates is at the end of this month. We will circulate at the end of this webinar not only the link to the registration of this webinar and also the PowerPoint presentations that have been given, but we will also circulate the template to be filled in with your positive example of relationship between sustainable wood energy and FLR. We will post everything, the registration and the PPTs also on the website. As Olivier was mentioning, indeed, we are trying to focus as much as possible on biochar to clarify a lot of issues related to biochar as an opportunity with its challenges. And we have already held a webinar on the 7th of May on biochar systems for sustainable agriculture. The keynote speaker in that webinar was Professor David Chiaramonti from the Polytechnic University of Turin. And we are planning to have on the 11th of June a new webinar on biochar. The title is Climate Smart Biochar Systems, Opportunities and Challenges, and the keynote speaker in this case will be Professor Johannes Lehmann from Cornell University. The registration and the PowerPoint presentation of the webinar that was held on the 7th of May are already on the GBEP website, and we are looking forward also to have the next webinar on biochar on the 11th of June, and also in that case, registration of the webinar and PowerPoint presentation will be posted on the website. With this, I would like to thank you all for your participation and have a very good rest of the day. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you. Thank you very much for your participation. Goodbye.
Goodbye.